Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for attending the meeting of the Standards Committee, which is being held on Thursday, the 21st of December 2023. Welcome to everyone. My name's Councillor Kath Unsworth, and I'm the chair of the meeting. Councillor John Rainsbury is the vice chair. Members of the committee are present here at the Civic Centre. Please switch on your microphone to indicate if you want to speak and to switch them off once you finish speaking. Members who've dialed in via Teams are asked to keep their microphone on mute, and please use your raise hand function to indicate a request to speak, and mute your microphone once you finish speaking. I don't think there's anybody on, is there? Reports will be presented by officers and then debated in committee. Once committee's considered the report, I'll then invite comments from other members present. Please note this meeting is recorded and live streamed on YouTube. The web link for this is displayed on the agenda for the meeting. Before we move to the agenda, may I introduce Victoria, our new independent person on the committee. Would you like to, Victoria?
Tunnicliffe, that's my maiden name. So Claire is kindly going to update everything for me so it shows the correct name for me.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you.
So Victoria joins us for her appointment earlier this year. Welcome to the committee, Victoria. And move on to the first item on the agenda. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Hindle-Taylor, and just to note that Councillor Turner is here in substitution for Councillor Lillis. Thank you.
Thank you. And declarations of interest. If a member, do I need to read that all right? If anybody has a pecuniary interest, are requested to leave the meeting completely, the member can then rejoin the meeting following the completion of the item in question. Does anyone have any interest to declare? Right, so we're on to the minutes of the last meeting. So we've got the minutes of the last meeting for approval. They have been sent out to the members of the committee, the previous committee, because it's completely changed and we're all new members now. But there's been no feedback on any, so I propose.
I'm not sure because I wasn't at the last meeting. Or if you're not at the last meeting, can you take part in voting for the minutes?
Yeah, it's a function of the committee to approve. It does seem a bit of an oddity that you can approve minutes of a meeting that you weren't at, but it is a function of the committee to do so. So, for example, at a full council meeting, all councillors can vote on approval of the minutes if they choose to. Yes.
That they are a true record of that meeting. Was anybody there to second it?
So,
John.
thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So confirm that the minutes are approved.
Yes.
Right. Item 4 is the standards update from Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so it's been just a little over 12 months since this committee has previously met. So it seemed appropriate to just give a quick update as to the work that's been undertaken in relation to standards in the last 12 months. It's already been mentioned, Victoria's been appointed in that period, and welcome and thank you, Victoria, for agreeing and volunteering to fulfil the role of independent person. Good luck with that. So the report is just for noting, but it's just to cover off some of the activities that we've been undertaking. So we've done quite a bit of work in the last couple of years on the code of conduct, and we reviewed the LGA model code, and there was a lot of work undertaken by members. The there was no obligation to adopt the code in the LGA form, and members decided to amend the presentation of it and add to the content of it, and that's been approved and adopted by full council and has now been implemented and is in use as the current code of conduct for this council. In relation to complaints received, there have been a total of 4 councillors complained of this calendar year, and of this, there've actually been 6 complaints, but on 2 occasions there were separate complaints about the same incident or same councillor. So they were treated as a single form of complaint. None of the complaints have been referred to investigation. And as members will be aware, the process in relation to receipt of complaints provides for the monitoring officer or the deputy monitoring officer to assess the complaint at first instance to see whether it is actually a breach of the code of conduct, and then to see, in consultation with the independent person, whether it's suitable for what we call a local resolution, which just means it looks like a breach of the code of conduct, but it's on the lower end of the scale. So all of those matters, par 1, have been treated either as not being a made out complaint or suitable for local resolution, and you'll see that 2 of the incidents were resolved by way of a letter or of personal apology or personal explanation, and 1 was by way of me having a conversation with both the complainant and the councillor concerned, just to talk through the alleged, well, the conduct that had taken place. It was that one, just to be clear, was borderline as to whether it actually constituted a breach of the code of conduct or not. But it was clear that there wasn't the intention to breach the code. And whilst it wasn't a matter that required an apology, it would just develop the understanding between members. I'm happy to say there's no pattern of behaviour. You know, there's a low sample there of complaints, but there's no pattern of behaviour that's causing me of concern, and therefore I nothing that I'll bring to the committee to say these are matters that are of particular interest or things we should be turning our attention to. I think for members who've been on the council a bit longer, it's been noted that it's noticeable that there's been an improved standard of behaviour at council meetings and during the course of debate. There's significantly fewer complaints been received over the last few years compared to certainly the period pre-pandemic. And I think when we're in the council meetings in particular, that's when all councils get together. What's noticeable is that the debates are very much, particularly in relation to the council reports, are very much on the issues, and the discussion and debate is around the matters in the reports rather than, you know, as has been the case before, occasionally personal attacks or even personal comments. So there's been big improvements in member behaviour in the last few years, and that there's a lot of credit needs to go to the members of the council who've embraced the changes that the Standards Committee have sought to drive through, and so that's really pleasing to see. I do mention this in this report because it leads in nicely into the next one. One of the complaints we received was to do with the use of social media. And those who've spoken to me on this committee about social media before know my views, which is it's both a brilliant and dangerous tool. And it is the biggest area that is open for interpretation, and biggest area arguably of risk for members when using it, but at the same time it's an incredibly powerful tool for getting out consistent messages and lines of communication to residents, which is one of the main functions and responsibilities of councillors. So it comes out of one of the complaints, but also the work that's been done before, that we'll be proposing to look at the social media protocol moving forward. So that's the report, Chair. It is there for noting and information. I'm happy to take any questions on it. As in previous years, it's not the practice to go into the detail of complaints and the identity of councillors. It's really just to provide some information as to the work that's been undertaken.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks for managing to get most of the all the complaints sorted, so it makes our job a lot easier. Can you just remind me, when you do that, is the independent persons involved, or is that just at officer level?
Yes. What tends to happen is that there's a three-stage test applied when complaints are received, which is, was the councillor acting in that capacity? If there is an assumption that the behaviour it took place, so we assume the allegation is correct and factually accurate, and if so, is that behaviour a breach of the code of conduct? Because you do get complaints that are factually correct that aren't actually breaches of the code of conduct. And then finally is the public interest test that's applied, which is a test, is it serious enough to warrant doing anything else with it, which is where it comes into the local resolution or whether to refer it to investigation. Now, it's that last section where the independent person will be involved, and that's where either myself or Dave form a view as to whether it is a breach, how serious that breach is, and whether it either just needs to be a conversation or whether it needs to be an investigation.
Thank you. We'll now open it up to any questions or comments from the committee.
Thank you. The councillor Facebook accounts, I presume, I'm not sure how everyone operates. I have a council one and a private one. Do the officers actively monitor the council ones, or is it just when a problem arises? Or
no, we don't, because we're not a police force. The code of conduct is personal to each councillor, and compliance with it is personal to you. We have accounts that we use to look at issues that have been raised with us, but we don't actively. There are 50 councillors at South Ribble and 42 at Chorley, so it would be a full-time occupation to be checking councillors' Facebook and other social media profiles for compliance. But what we would look to do is make sure there's adequate training for members, so they understand what their responsibilities are, and that's something we'll come on to perhaps with the social media protocol later.
Yeah, this is purely a question for understanding, so I'm not saying there's any issues that I've got, but we're talking about councillor protocols here about complaints. Is there a procedure if you've got a complaint to make about an officer? Oh, that's a genuine question. I don't know. So
yes, there is. So officers have two forms of control, I suppose, for want of a better word. So there's our contract of employment, which contains expectations as to our behaviours, and we also have the member officer protocol that we're supposed to comply when we do have an officer code of conduct as well. If there is a suggestion of breach of any of those protocols, then the appropriate, well, depending on who it is, it would be their line manager to report it to. So if it was me, Councillor Turner, although we get on very well, it would be a report to the Chief Executive in relation to my behaviour or conduct. If it was somebody within the directorate, then I would suggest reporting it to their director. But it would be an employment matter rather than like a code of conduct matter.
Lovely. No. Okay, so that brings us nicely onto the social media protocol. And again, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so this comes out of a couple of issues. Firstly, we did review the code of conduct approximately 12 months ago and adopted it within the last 12 months. And the social media protocol is one of the interpretive documents that assists members in interpreting how the code of conduct should apply to the use of social media. So it's appropriate to review that document as well. Also, as I mentioned, we had an issue arise with the use of social media last summer, and it does seem that there was some confusion in the mind both of the complainant and the user of social media as to what was appropriate and what was intended. So it's probably an opportune moment to review the protocol, both in terms of making sure it's still fit for purpose, but also then thereafter raising awareness with members as to its existence and its benefit of its use. So I have appended to the report a copy of the current social media protocol and also a copy of the Local Government Association protocol. I'm hopefully members have had the opportunity to read through both documents. I do think the council one is a good code, a good protocol. I think it is short enough that it's easy for members to read, but it's got sufficient information in it that it is clear as to what the intentions and requirements are. The Local Government Association Code is actually very similar in content, although different in form. So there's, and then finally I included the Lancashire County Council code as well. Now, some of the benefits of that is with the local code of conduct that was adopted, one of the reasons for having a model code of conduct was to get consistency, not only for members who might be multi-hatted, but also for members of the public to have an understanding of what the obligations are on members of different authorities and to be consistent about them. So there is some merit to thinking about having a consistent protocol, but that shouldn't be the overriding aim of the Standards Committee, in my view. I think it's important that the committee put themselves in the shoes of users of social media, of being a councillor, and looking at the document, making sure it actually assists them in using social media. So I put a few considerations in paragraphs 14, 15 and 16. Because as part of this is to try and provoke a bit of debate and discussion with how best to deal with this particular issue. So there's questions. Do you like the format of the current, or the form of the current protocol document, or would you prefer something more detailed, more such as the LGA code or LCC code? How do you want the protocol to be structured? Do you want it to provide a framework for the application of the code, or do you want it to be more directive than that, so that it's almost telling councillors how to use social media through the code? That would necessitate a more detailed document. If as monitoring officer, I would be a little bit wary of being overly prescriptive of a protocol in that form. My aim with the Code of Conduct has always been to make members understand what their obligations are under the code and give them the ability to think how that code should apply to different situations, rather than to give a list of situations and try and fit the behaviours into those potential scenarios. The last one is not a throwaway suggestion, which is to have a working group. And I do think, Chair, there is some merit in having a group set up. We would need to set out the terms of reference for it and the scoping of their instruction, but to actually look at the protocol and look at what they as a group think that the council need from the protocol, and deconstruct it a bit and then put it back together. So that's really my recommendation to members, which is to establish a working group and try and set some terms of reference for that working group tonight. But equally, I am not going to be upset if members sit there and go, I've read through all three of those protocols. I'm quite satisfied with the current council one, on the basis that there's some tweaks to it for this, that and the other. And it's really for members, because it's very much a member-driven document.
Thank you, Miss. I mean, I think the format of the one that we've got is easier than the others that you showed us. But as things do move on with social media and IT, it might be a good idea to just make sure it is as up to date as it can be. So are we asking this group to volunteer to?
Well, I think,
if they agree.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's as much to get the input from the committee to find the general consensus on views as to the best approach to this.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, well.
I'm actually the only person around this table who was part of the working group on the Code of Conduct. So what I can give to you from that is that we started in a way very much from scratch in terms of what members' ideas were. It was obviously a more complicated document, but I certainly found it a useful exercise, and I certainly I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I said that those members who were most involved at the time also found it very useful, because as we met several times over the year, and we found different concepts arising as we went through the documentation, and the result of which was that members had quite a considerable input in what they felt and what we felt as a group would be useful to add to the document, far more than when we started, because you were faced with this document and you think, well, you know, how on earth do we approach this? But it was very much a worthwhile exercise, and those members who were there through the process as a whole, I think thought that they had very much contributed to the document which was accepted in the end.
You would propose that was repeated, that process?
Well, from my point of view, I think it was a worthwhile exercise, and perhaps more importantly, in a way, I think that those members who were involved felt that they had very much contributed to it.
Yeah, I think the key word in there is in that number 15, it's a framework. You need a framework, because the problem is, with all things IT, it moves on, it expands, it changes, it's interpreted differently, it's used differently. Somebody gets hold of something and it becomes national and everybody runs with it. It's really difficult to have anything that's sort of fixed. But you do need a framework, a guidance is what you're looking for, isn't it? And I said perhaps a working group could come up with that, but you don't want it to be too prescriptive. The idea of having, it says here, detailed explanations and examples of compliance might not work that, because things change and the interpretation changes as you move along. But I think the idea maybe having a working group to find that framework, so you've got a sort of standard set of rules that you look at, no matter what you're looking at, this is the starting point. It needs to cover this at least, and then you can sort of move it on then. But yeah, that's my view on it. Thank you, Chair.
No, I'm moving on from that. Whilst I think the first one we're talking about is good, it's acceptable, it's in a good format, it's not too detailed. Like you say, it's 12 months ago since it's been looked at, and social media is changing every day, and perhaps a working group to keep up with what's changing in the social media. And so I think that will be a good idea it might not need any changes, or it might not just need a bit of glitch, but I think to look at it in the changes that are going on, because I can't keep up with social media, I'll tell you. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you, John. Any other comments?
I'm happy with it as it is, but I've got two minor things that might be worth just noting. On page 16, in the some of the don'ts, most of them read like, don't post in haste, don't use council facilities, apart from the 8th one, which just doesn't flow like that, if that makes sense. That might be worth a slightly retweak of wording. It's very minor, and then the other thing that's also extremely minor is recently Twitter's been renamed as X. Yeah. So it might be worth just saying X, formerly known as Twitter. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Councillor Watson. So are we happy to say that, yes, we will form a small working group? Is there anyone who would, are we looking for volunteers tonight?
I think if we can look for volunteers tonight,
And then
that'd be
look-
really helpful.
I mean, we're looking for.
Include me, Dave.
Right, Colin. That means Councillor Sharples, Councillor Gleeson.
I was going to put myself, but I was just wondering about Conor. I think because of your younger aspect to it, if you ever can say that,
Yeah.
you have a knowledge more than I have of the what's going on X, formerly Twitter,
Yeah.
and all the rest of them. It depends how many you want on the group. I'm more than happy to go on the group, but we'd end up with all the committee on the group. We're not
Just on that point, if all members want to be on, then they can be.
Right.
It will make the meeting where you consider the feedback from the working group go a lot smoother if you've all been involved in getting to that point. And we would just set it up as an additional meeting. So part of me is thinking you don't want too many people there because it can slow things down, but we are not a big committee. And I would suggest, Chair, that if you wanted to open the invitation to the independent people as well, invitation, not requirement to attend. But then I think that could be quite useful as well, because you get the input from the residents, effectively, the people who don't have a stake in it.
Councillor Turner, it's difficult for you to...
Thank you, Chair. I'm a substitute, so I'll have a word with my colleague, James. And if he can't do it or whatever, I might consider doing it. It's just I'm a bit busy at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Turner.
I would just say that not being the only one to be left out, I'm quite happy to join. So, I was just saying it was going to be a small committee. That's why I asked the question, how many is going to be on the committee? But like you say, it's a small meeting, so I'm quite happy.
Well, Chair, if I can make a suggestion then, what we can do is look to find a mutually acceptable time for everybody, but then just fix it and keep the invitation open. If members can attend, great. If they can't, then we will circulate the minutes of the meeting, and members are welcome to feed in with written comments. I can tell you've had a look at it already and you've got some points to make, so they can be fed in to the work.
Right. We've just had that it probably won't be before Christmas, if that's all right. Okay. I think we've finished the meeting. We're closing the meeting, and the live stream can finish. Thank you, everyone, for your contribution.
Thank you.